Please do not swear.
Beep, 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 beep. Send that message in Morse code.
Hello and welcome to eCommerce Matters, brought to you by BlackCurve. We help e-commerce businesses make pricing decisions. Today's title is called Christmas Lockdown, Get Your Pricing Sorted. I'm joined by Dr. Rob Horton, my normal sidekick in logical purity, mathematical purity, or putting the theory into practice. We'll go for one of those anyway. And I'm Philip Huthwaite, the founder of BlackCurve. So without further ado, here we go. I don't think you can take the responsibility for logical purity because one of our other members of staff already has.
Yeah, I was going to say it, and it's not really me.
If I'm brutally honest, I hadn't actually written enough notes, and I suddenly went, "Hang on, what am I going to call you this time?" So shall we go straight into prop time? Because I think let's do that. Let's do that.
Yeah.
So, Rob, what have you bought to symbolise today's podcast title called Christmas Lockdown? Get your pricing sorted. What have you bought?
Well, so for those watching at home, they may recognise that I'm back where I was in the summer.
And where is that, Rob?
I'm back in Devon because we are going into lockdown again. So my other half and I we've escaped. And what I've got to symbol lockdown and into Christmas is my new cooking book, which is what I'm going to spend my evenings and weekends doing now I can't get out of the house very far.
Do you want to describe the cookbook? Because obviously some people are only listening to this.
It's Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, and it's by Samin Nosrat, and she also did a Netflix series. And it's not so much recipes, but it's principles. So it's kind of like how to level up as a chef, what things go well together, what makes great food. So I've moved to Devon. I now have a much bigger kitchen than my flat in London. So I'm going to be cooking. So that's my...
So you can spend even more money on cooking gadgets, basically, because you've got extra space to do it. Is that the other?
Oh, the really good thing is that actually my parents, because I'm at my parents, they've got most of them already. So though I did spend £100 in a casserole dish last week, which is now in my flat in London. But
right. Okay. Is it Licorice?
No, I can't afford that. You got to get married to get that. Isn't that the rule?
I'll quickly tell you an anecdote about a Licorice dish. My father, who's also, I work with him at BlackCurve actually, for those of you who don't know, we went camping and he borrowed someone's Licorice dish, and as he was washing it up afterwards, like the big casserole dish, our particular tent when we were camping was on the edge of a cliff, and he was holding both of the handles, and there was a bit of water left in it after he washed it up, and he sort of moved his hands together to get rid of the water, and these things weigh an absolute ton, right? Yeah. And so he just let go of it, and it flew off the side of the thing. Yeah, I think my mother wasn't best pleased because they did the honourable thing and said, "Don't worry, we'll." It was a friend's Licorice dish as well, which I probably should have mentioned. They said, "Don't worry, we'll pay for it." And then they said, "Yes, you will," because it was a wedding gift. And so I think that was £300 poorer. That was an expensive washing up.
Who takes Licorice pot?
Well, you haven't lived, you know.
No,
when you've got always on the first day, you always bring a dish that's pre-cooked from home, and there was a ton of kids there, so you just literally throw it into a dish and bring it. We're not posh campers, don't worry. I don't want you to get the wrong idea.
Yeah, I mean, it does give the wrong signals, yeah.
So anyway, enough about that. You're gonna be cooking this lockdown. That's to symbolise Christmas lockdown, and you're gonna be a one-man band supporting the economy. Well, actually, you're not, because you just said you're not going to spend any more money on cooking stuff. So
no, I will. What am I talking about?
So you're going to solve the economic woes that people live in by spending money. Shall I show you my prop?
Yeah.
Okay, I've decided to go. Well, clearly, Rob and I have more time on our hands to read, so mine's also a book. But I have actually read this book already, so it's not a new book. And so it's Warren Buffett, The Snowball, and I actually read this years and years ago. I can't quite remember when this particular book was published. But the reason I've come up with this book is because Warren Buffett has recently come out to say that retailers that discount during lockdown is going to be the death of them. Okay, so discounting during lockdown is not the way to survive, or not the way for long-term success, or to put yourself in the best possible position to springboard out of this situation. So I've got a double relevance. I think
yours
on that.
better than mine. I like that.
We'll have to maybe say next week we're not allowed books. Otherwise we're just going to be showing off our various book collections over time.
I have to admit that my most of my props I could have got are either my flat in London or packed, because we got here at midnight last night, and then I've been straight into work. So
I don't want to hear excuses for next week's
I'm
prop,
be more
prop
inventive
edition.
next week.
You've just told me that your parents have got more gadgets in the kitchen, so just steal one of those. Surely that's the next.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think that. I'm a big fan of Warren Buffett, though. Although interestingly, he completely missed the tech boom. So
he did, but he's doing all right, I think. So we won't feel too sorry for him.
What do they call him? The Wizard of Omaha? Where's he from?
Yeah. I thought you were going to say the Wizard of Oz, and that's a different person entirely. So fantastic. So today, Rob, where would you like to start? So if you're a retailer and you're well, I mean, in the UK, the lockdown started today, right? Mm-hmm. So we've gone from one lockdown. We had a bit of a reprieve. We thought bricks and mortar stores were going to open. There was mumblings and grumblings that actually bricks and mortar stores were going to stay open during subsequent lockdown, but actually they've closed all non-essential stores. So we've only really got your supermarkets really are the main ones that are pretty much staying open, or your DIY stores and things like that. So where should retailers start from their pricing perspective to make sure that they don't, they follow some of Warren, I'm on first name terms with him, some of Warren's advice to support to survive the economy?
I think it's probably worth looking at the place I'd start is looking at the last lockdown, if I'm completely honest, because the benefit of this one is that we've done it before, and you've had some time to cope and put procedures in place, and it should be recent enough, and you should have been expecting it. So I think the place to start is what were the takeaways, the key takeaways from the last lockdown? Where did people do well? Where did people do less well? And then kind of building on that for me.
So I think we spoke a lot about supply chain constraints, didn't we, last time? But I think we probably should have started a swear jar for the amount of times that we mentioned it. But certainly, even before we look at pricing as the actual physical pricing decisions, you got to get your supply chain sorted, or at least get visibility of your supply chain to enable the subsequent decisions to take place, because certainly from the case studies that I was involved in and saw, the companies that had visibility of their supply chain and used solutions like BlackCurve to support them with the pricing decisions, it was all about enabling them to hold their nerve, to hold that price point, especially if they had visibility that certain products, the supply chain was going to be constrained and it wasn't going to be restocked. So you win no prizes by selling out too cheaply.
No, and there's actually, from talking to friends who work in the space in particular, there are some huge knock-on issues that I hadn't even thought of around quality control, because, well, obviously the manufacturing, the places in manufacturing are going through these boom bust periods of kind of people in and people out. What's trying to maintain an economy and keep it afloat? So quality has taken a hit, I think, and then obviously that hits your stock levels, because if you're putting in, if you think you've got an order coming in, and you're having to, I don't know, a friend of mine works selling in fashion, and they had issues with fabric quality, and they've just had to ditch it, and then that has knock-on effects in terms of their sustainability goals as well. It's kind of this horrible, vicious effect, and I think you're right. That was the key takeaway, is that actually manufacturing and distribution, because they are high population density and then require on the borders being open. So to come back to what you're saying, I think from a pricing perspective, you want to be, and back to Warren Buffett, actually, you probably don't want to be discounting, because you, like, the discounting implies you have volume to shift. And for people in the more FMCG space, like like evergreen goods, I think is a better way of putting it. That's not really, that's unlikely. You're more likely to be squeezed on the supply than the demand. In fact, I mean, just anecdotally, people are going to start shopping a lot again because they're bored and can't get out of the house. So the discounting, hold your nerve. Don't discount, hold your nerve is probably smart. And probably don't follow your competitors if it looks like they're if they're tanking their prices. Hold your nerve. See if you see a hit to your sales. If you do, then yeah, potentially go after them. But I think that would be the interesting differentiator, because from the other side of it, on the front end, I'm a sore again. A lot of people really screwed up the because and completely understandably, right? There's so much going on. You don't know. You're being forced to make decisions. Like, do I keep the shops open? Do I keep people in the warehouse? What's going on? And a lot of people just shut it all down, and that, or at least went to skeleton staff, furloughed everyone. Furlough scheme's coming back on, actually. So it's a bit rambling, but realistically, I think we're going to see the same pinches. So supply chain, staffing, spikes in demand that we saw in the previous lockdown.
Well, I think it's certainly interesting that a lot of our customers saw trading patterns back in March, April, May. Probably April, because the lockdown was around 23rd of March, wasn't it? First time round properly, that they would typically see around this time of year. Okay, now a lot of retailers were gearing up to do big Black Friday events, big Cyber Monday events, big kind of Christmas season discounts, and it's almost, if you looked at yourself and you had a phenomenal April, May, June, theory dictates, and we'll probably see that the truth backs this up, the actuals back this up, is that you're more than likely to get that again. Because, okay, fine, you might not necessarily see as many wacky purchases, like, I'm going to go and learn keyboards, so I'm going to drop 200 quid on a keyboard that I wouldn't have done that kind of previously. But I think you're still certainly going to see that type of behaviour. So that's why
I contest that, actually, just because I think you will. I mean, because I think people who didn't do that the first time are more likely to do that now. Because I held off really buying anything in the first, because it's just like, well, we're in London, and well, we were working pretty hard, so I didn't have much time for anything else. But like, and I've got most of the outdoor stuff I do in terms of, I've got my bike, I've got the rest of it, I've got my running stuff. But winter is, I'm not spec'd out for winter for things to do, right? Like, it's like I was saying about the cooking book, so I probably will buy some cooking equipment, probably some better knives, if I'm completely honest. We're down here, I'm a bit of a snob, but like, it's that kind of thing, because it's seasonality is going to play a huge role here. So the stuff that people, sure, guitars, keyboards, musical instruments are unlikely to double up on, but things like things to do indoors rather than things to do outdoors.
Yeah, I think where I was going with it was that if you had a successful April, May, June, it dictates that you're likely to have a similar. So if you look at what pricing strategies you adopted, if they supported growth in your business over March, April, May, June, I wouldn't necessarily move too far away from that. And I think and to come back to, I mean, the title of this is the snowball, right? Okay, that's one of the reasons that big changes is really hard to work out, is it working or not. Smaller tweaks and incremental changes is a lot easier to work out if it's working. So that's really kind of my focus of encouraging retailers to think about test and learn, small incremental changes. If what worked last time, the theory dictates that it's going to work this time, so adopt that, rather than necessarily going about, last year I was going to do, or if you were geared up to do big Black Friday discounts, which I have a bone of contention about anyway, and you can reference all of our other literature that's come out of this time, maybe think, do I need to do that, and have a look at what happened last March and April.
The thing I'd add to that, which often doesn't get talked about, is that we're going back into furlough till March. Not we, but as the furlough scheme's being pushed on. So the automation side of, well, business processes in general, but pricing is something I'd be heavily investigating, because resources are likely to be tight as it is. I know personally friends working in retail who've had whose whole teams are going on furlough, and it's just them running the ship. So the more things, not just pricing, but stock management or ad spend or whatever, the more things that you can automate, probably the better, and probably the more robust you'll be. And this was a story that we saw in the first lockdown from a retailer perspective, especially apparent in America, where I think there is a much wider divide between online and bricks and mortar. In the companies that had invested heavily in kind of, for want of a better, retail tech, whatever that be, succeeded because they were more efficient, they were more nimble, they were more forward thinking. And the ones that were kind of based on older trading models couldn't pivot as fast and struggled. But I think that is a lesson I have sympathy for the first time, but not for the second time. I guess it.
First sign of insanity is doing the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say,
times
fool
and
me
expecting.
Once, shame on you. Fool me twice, I won't get fooled again.
But I mean, even we spoke about it, and the last podcast we were talking about Shopify, right? What's their tagline, or what do they believe in? Focus on brand, automate everything else, right? And we are going to see certain sectors that are more staff members are getting furloughed than others, and it will be kind of subject to what's a nice to have and what's kind of a must have, and it's probably in the nice to have category that people are going to, naturally you'd expect are going to suffer, unless there's, as we've spoken about, certain niche industries that suddenly get a boom because of a random boom because of lockdown.
But I mean, that's bang on. There's a fundamental shift in the market. But think about various, so like video games booming for fairly obvious reasons, because people like myself played a lot when I was younger. I'm now indoors all the time, and actually that is something you can do in lockdown, and so you scratch that itch. Conversely, I think cameras obviously was one of the big losers of the previous one, because people aren't outdoors, and I mean, probably even the iPhone sales are hit a bit, because I know that they were under projections. I know you've got one.
Wait.
Just got one, but like,
there are other models available.
Yeah, if you can't go out in the world, and this is probably a fairly UK or European centric thing, but if you can't go out in the world and show it off, unless someone a young child breaks your phone,
but you're forgetting the big influencer market, which has had a massive, everyone's going on. Everybody is still bragging, but they're bragging about different things, and so there is that.
Yeah. But my point, I don't think the market's going away at all. I just think it's shifting focus.
Yeah,
and
to different.
It's
different
not clear
things.
to me. There are some obvious ones, and there are a lot of unobvious ones, and it's not clear to me what's winning out. But I think status, like traditional status purchases, have pivoted, right? So fashion companies are now doing loungewear and masks, which makes complete sense, right? And it's that because I imagine that evening evening wear sales are through the floor because who's going out, right?
I've got my lovely flowing black dress and I've got my dinner jacket on order. You know, what do you say? You know, what are you talking about?
It's probably, honestly, a good time to buy. We'd call that a buying opportunity in the city where long term it has value, but it depends how much your weight's fluctuating during lockdown, I think, depending on how much exercise you're doing.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think the furloughing this time round, but I feel that, you know, all the industry reports that I'm reading is that a lot of people are have already done that much of the rebalancing, you know, as part of the last exercise, and so a lot of the individuals that are going on to furlough this time are from the sectors like restaurants, gyms, those kind of sectors that have the immediate lockdown.
Bricks and mortar.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Anything that's got a physical
retail.
presence, right? That's what I'm referring to. Whereas the other businesses that have been impacted have done that rebalancing. Okay, so whereas in a bricks and mortar store, you physically need people there. So, you know, once you get rid of a shop, or you know, you don't need those people. It's a different kind of rebalancing, and so it's those individuals, their purchasing habits, that are going to have the knock-on effect. Because if they don't have the money, they're not going to make the decision. So certain businesses are going to suffer, you know, less or more than others. That's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, so. The purchasing habits one is really interesting from a psychology perspective, because I can't work out whether people are going to spend less because they're worried, or more to cheer themselves up.
Well, no, but I'm coming at the point of view, if you physically don't have the money, you're not going to spend. I think so. So I think there's two different sides to it. Yeah.
So you've got the furlough, the people who are on furlough who are still going to be on an 80% of salary, and obviously people in that situation, it's really tough, right? And money will be tight. And then you've got the other side of it where people will be like, well, I'm unlikely to go on a holiday Q1, Q2 that I'd normally go on. I don't know why I'm saying Q1, Q2. All right, let's just say next year or next time.
You've been doing too many reports recently, clearly.
I've been hanging out with the sales guys too much. Should I spend that money on, I mean, this is going to sound horrifically middle class, right? But do I go on a ski trip, or do I just make my home a bit nicer, right? Like, because, and if it looks like we're going to have rolling lockdown for an extended period, then that kind of home improvement side of it, or home life improvement, suddenly has a much higher value than before.
Well, I mean, without going too off topic, a lot of that money is going on to. I was reading well, I won't share what I was reading, but it was a lot of
now I'm suspicious.
No, but a lot of that money is going on to actually a lot of individuals that have that disposable income, and that demographic that would typically go on like a ski holiday or equivalent, right, is moving that money to do their own personal investments. So like AJ Bell, those kind of platforms are doing phenomenally well, because people are now actually using, because you can't, the interest rates are so terrible that people think, you know what are you going to invest in, right? So it's a case of, do I go, do you know what, I'm going to see if I can make some money, or do I go and buy myself, I don't know, I keep picking a keyboard, I haven't bought one myself, so I've just got it on the mind. But
just while you keep talking about, I'll show you the second thing I brought up but didn't talk about. So this is my other lockdown thing.
So you are learning, or you know already, are you
No, I'm crap. I think it's a technical
You're probably
term.
a grade 6, aren't you, or something?
No, not at all. So I got an app. My parents bought me an electric piano 10 years ago, and I've moved it round from every house and every flat I've lived in. My brother, for those that don't know, is a professional opera singer. So when I lived with him, it was super useful. So he used it for practicing lessons. And then lockdown, it was like, right, I'm going to put some hours in. And I'm graduating off the app, which is hilarious to watch if you know anything about modern culture, because I don't know, all the songs are pop songs and I don't know any of them. Like, I literally I think bloody Pitbull or Keisha or something, and I'm just bashing this out on the piano. So I've decided I'm going to get some proper music that I actually understand and know how the tune goes, so I can learn it.
Furlough and older, basically. That's what you're going for.
So basically the last thing in the app is Furlough, which I did learn 20 years ago.
There we go. I won't embarrass myself too further.
Yeah, you're bang on, mate.
I'm pretty sure that's the only song I can do on the piano. That and Rugrats, for those of you who know. Right.
Now that is an old school. That dates us.
So if you don't know how old I am, you certainly can probably
do now. Because there is a generation of people who, when you say the only thing I can play on the piano is Rugrats, know exactly what that means.
I'm 21. Yeah. Right. So.
Me too.
Let's go back on topic, because I feel we've gone a bit off. So I think there's a lot to consider. If we come back to other things that retailers can consider, automation we've spoken about. That's a key thing. When you are making your decisions, whether you're automating them or you're not automating them, we've spoken about supply visibility, because that's a strong one.
Also, sorry, on that note, at the automation piece, it's not just about front-end competitive pricing decisions. When you've got a really variable supply chain and stock prices, if you're drop shipping, for example, or you're in a market where you can switch suppliers for a given product, being able to pass that cost price on automatically on the daily is a huge benefit, and I think underrepresented in when people talk about this space, because people think competition, but they don't think about automating the fundamental business process, which is, oh, blimmin' heck, I've got another 1,000 cost price changes that I've got to do, and they're changing so rapidly at the minute, and this is taking up an hour of my day, 3 days a week, right? Like,
and that in itself can be costing you a huge amount of money, yeah. Because if suddenly that product becomes high in demand, and the cost price has changed, you might have lost even if you might have lost that opportunity to make more. Yeah, the costs have gone up, as you probably expect it to.
You can bleed margin really, really fast.
And that's irrelevant, as you say, of what the competition is doing. So the only way you can do that, when you have, even if you have 10 products, you've got to be on it.
If you have if you have one product in an incredibly dynamic market, as in like it's changing daily, you should still automate it in my view, because it's like if the process is, some people, we get a spreadsheet from our supplier and then I update Shopify, Magento, BigCommerce, wherever I hold my prices. That process is, with something like what we do, super straightforward, super safe, and then you get a load of other add-on benefits for free, but really you're taking a core business process that's an absolute pain and freeing up your time. So that if you cost those 3 hours at however much, that gives you a baseline of how much you're willing to pay to take that out, right? Like, because you're gaining that back.
What about competitor pricing? I mean, you've I think a couple of minutes ago you mentioned competitors, so it's probably a good time to talk about it. So, how should retailers tackle their competitor pricing strategy during a lockdown? Do they need to worry about them?
I may be somewhat controversially may say no, and the reason for that is that you're more likely to end up in a race to the top. We spoke about this previously than a race to the bottom, because everything is supply driven, not demand driven. So if you were to come to me and say, Rob, what I'm really busy, I'm really tight on time, what should I do about pricing in a lockdown? I would say automate it, put in a competitor matching strategy, and then go and focus about making sure you can get enough supply and shoring up the other parts of your business. And that's super easy to do and super cheap. It costs you about, I don't know, 500 quid a month or something to automate that entire process, hook into your, I almost said CRM, but that's not what I mean. Hook into Magento, Shopify, BigCommerce, whatever you use, WooCommerce, whatever platform you're on, hit an API or whatever, and then you're away, and then you don't actually have to worry about it, especially if you've just put in business safeguards to make sure you're not going below the price you want, you're not going too nuts. And then you can do clever stuff if you've got the time. But I think one of the key themes of this period is that, especially going into what's traditionally a heavy trading period as well, it's just about how can you make it as easy as possible? How can I just make sure that's working, tick the box, quote unquote, forget about it, let it make money for me, and then don't worry about it.
Because I mean, yeah, I absolutely. I should have a kind of do 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 button, shouldn't I? When somebody says something, it's not controversial, but says something to take note. But I think it's about working out which competitors and which products are competitor driven, and if you don't automate it, you've not got a chance really of keeping up. Okay, so
yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that's a fair point. I think to run a very successful competitor strategy, you need to know that anyway. In that you should. The reason I was saying this controversial is a bit controversial for what a normal stance is, but we've spoken at length about the dangers of competitor data. There's a lot of jank. There's a lot of kind of quite not bad data, but like non-representative data. Maybe someone's got 5 units they're just trying to shift. There's some weird eBay supplier or something. And really, you don't want to be matching them or following them or being influenced them. But there's usually about 5 or 6 people, pick a random number, but there's a group of people that you know them well, they're your true competition, and they're the people you should be building your strategies around, really. And then, if you've got time, drill into it, treat it on a brand by brand or category level. Some you'll win, some you'll be able to win more than others. But if we're in a really tight for time, busy trading period, don't know what's going on, find your core competitors, build a strategy around them, and automate it would be my advice.
Because especially in more jittery times like lockdown, you've spoken about the kind of race to the top, and the race to the bottom can happen just as much, because retailers can be going bust and they're shifting stock, so true. you don't want to be matching them. Alternatively, also cost price are fluctuating all the time, or a certain retailer might not have been able to secure product at a certain price, and they have to, ship it in rapidly. There's all sorts of things that are happening that they're making decisions, and you want to make sure that you're only following where you have to, and you're not just blanketly following kind of across the board. And that's why we haven't spoken about it, but that's why the whole demand piece is critical, because actually the demand for your products gives you visibility of what the market wants, what the market's doing. Yeah, and that's where you can then use that data to incrementally push the price up, incrementally push the price down, and the automation piece works out what is the right point at a given point, right? And you're in control of that.
And again, I'd probably say something a bit controversial.
Should I get my woo button out again?
In that, I think this is part of the piece that there's a bit of this you can automate, but some of it that you may not want to be automating, in that for 2 reasons, both good and bad. One, there's price gouging worries. So, all right, actually, I can back up and explain this better. Basically, when you do this kind of thing, you tune the size of the price change you want to make based on the amount of demand, right? And what happens in these periods where you have what's called a discontinuity, but a changing the market, is that actually you can get really sharp price spikes. And you can do that with kind of the rails on, but you run the risk of moving the price too slowly to really take advantage of it, or the rails off, and then you run you get into the kind of airplane flight football ticket pricing territory where things go up 4,000%. And given that this is likely to happen to a smaller subset of products, I would say using something like we do to notify you what this is happening to, and go through by hand and work out, actually, is this a sensible thing to be doing, or am I happy with the demand at the price it is, right? Because what a pricing algorithm won't really tell you about is things like customer behavior, brand loyalty, pricing impact. We do that through safeguarding, but through both the size of price changes and maximum price change, like the maximum price. But you may want to override that, and you may want to override that for a specific product within a group of products. So this is probably where I'd be focusing. I'd for the bulk of my products, I'd just be automating it, and then the time I was spending on pricing, I'd be spending on these kind of pricing decisions, because this is where you can also make serious margin, right? But it's touch and go, and for anyone out there, especially competitions, your AI won't be able to handle this well, because AI, especially machine learning AI, because it works off historical data, and you've got a change in the market, and we haven't seen enough of this to give you a good prediction. So you're much better off, in my view, automating the quote unquote boring standard issue stuff, as you'd expect, and then focusing your energy on the details, like on these really intricate pricing pieces.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, if an algorithm hasn't seen historically that cookware goes through the roof, because during a lockdown situation, it's not going to be able to predict that, right? It's not going to know that that's a pattern. I mean, okay, fine, it's the second lockdown, but we probably need a few more lockdowns and seasonality of lockdowns to work out what the product mix and what the price should be. I mean, one of the things I want to touch upon is the power of pricing in a lockdown. Some companies are going to be growing hyper growth periods again, right? And they're going to be laughing, right? How do you grow even more? How do you kind of laugh all the way to the bank? And for me, it's about doubling down where you're seeing opportunity, where you're seeing growth. And one of those is putting your marketing spend in the right place. Okay. So if you can connect what your pricing decisions are doing against how that's converting in sales, then you take that and work out where I should then subsequently put my money into Google and bid, and don't bid in the other areas, and take that money that you're bidding in other areas on the areas that are doing really well, because that's where you get, hey, if you're doing well, keep pushing. For me, that's my takeaway.
This is super interesting, actually, and I think really, really impactful during lockdown, because demand is so high that you don't need to advertise on certain products that you would normally, and so by looking at your set, so the first, when we talk about this in BlackCurve, like, the first thing is to look at your sales. Obviously, what's selling well, ABC it. Let's say good, however you want to positive, good, better, best, or like good top sellers, average sellers, poor sellers, is usually a good way of splitting things up. The first question you want to ask is, why aren't they selling, right? And often, usually for 20% of like the poor sellers, it's because they're mispriced, and you fix that out and they move up. And then similarly, actually, for the bulk of the products as well. And then feeding that information back in will tell you, okay, well, I can double down on the ones that haven't worked. The ones that aren't working don't work either through price or advertising spend. So what am I even doing here? And then how do I double and triple down on the ones that I've tuned in the market? And this is exacerbated in a lockdown because demand is so high. It's so extreme that really any change you make is multiplied, right? So if you're making twice the number of sales, any change in margin is in effect double to what it would be in a normal period. It's that kind of simplicity of maths almost. So obviously the other piece of that is stock, because there's not much point putting a huge amount of advertising into some, and it's that balance between stock and price that gives you the sell-through rate. Because it's that you want to do it, because you want to tune it so that your demand, you want to maximize your profitability through that period with all these levers, so that you're selling the stock you can at the rate that maximizes the amount of profitability. And the two levers you have for that is the amount of advertising you put in and the price you're selling it at. Those are your two that's your two gas and brake pedals. I think this one is fascinating, actually, because it really comes back to kind of what makes a really well functioning digital business, because it's not it comes back to the conversation we had with Manny about how do you get pricing like permeating into your business and helping you inform decisions elsewhere. And I think that's the core. And in these periods of crisis or high change, high market turbulence, all this stuff is so important because it's all magnified. If you double your, like I said, you double your sales, you double the impact of a decision. So anything you can eke out is that's right. So, and if you're I think not the fallacy, but often people focus, if they're in a growth stage, focus on product mix rather than optimizing margin in those kind of periods. And I don't I never really understand why it's an either or. I think it is the other thing, right? I do understand in the sense that if you're doing it by hand, it's an either or because you can focus the energy on one or the other. But one of those is much easier to automate than the other and will help snowball your growth. And even if it's not a direct contributor to your growth, it should maintain the market share, which is really, really what pricing is about, or help you maintain or dominate in the products that are already working, right? So you can take the process that you know works, automate that, kick that off, and then spend your time and energy looking for other products to kind of, or other areas to target.
Make hay while the sun is shining, as they say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, kind of.
So should I call final orders? Is there anything else you'd like to touch upon, Rob? Any discussion points you'd like to go through?
Not really. I mean, it's quite a broad one. This, I mean, it's bit in the, but I think, yeah, I think we've covered it. We've been through it before, I think is what I'd say. And I think that product mix will be different in terms of what's selling and what's not selling. But the overall, I'd be surprised if the overall business behaviors and winners and losers would, from an industry perspective, would that different. Especially in ecom, I think it's likely to be an especially busy period.
But I think the companies that did well last lockdown, they're the ones that the companies that didn't react need to look at what needs to find out what did they do well if they're in similar sectors, right? So if you, I don't know, I'm gonna stay with musical equipment for example because I've been for some reason decided to pick keyboards, right? You know, why has one musical retailer done better than another musical retailer in the last lockdown? You know, when you've got a similar product mix, right? And more than likely it's because they've invested in things like automation, you know, and more than likely it's because, and we've seen it ourselves, more than likely it's because they've invested in pricing decisions that are based on supply and demand. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that is critical, and that is not just solely for music. The companies that have done well, okay, there's a fair bit of luck that they've been in the right markets that suddenly demand, you know, for you couldn't have predicted it, has gone through the roof because of the lockdown. But the ones that have capitalized, made hay while the sun is shining, is because they've invested in automation, because during a lockdown period they're less concerned about their competitors, more focused on making decisions based on supply and demand, and are doing those incremental tweaks and constantly turning the handle, right? There's the one that succeed, and I'm pretty sure that they're the ones that will make hay again in winter. Who'd have thought?
Yeah, because they're already, they got a head start. I mean, this is the other bit in that, especially in the UK, after the last lockdown, there's been a huge panic to kind of quote unquote get online, but these digital, actually what we do doesn't take that long, but if you're doing this company wide, that is a huge project. And I mean, I know Shopify and BigCommerce and the rest of it has claimed to take companies online in a couple of weeks, but having known people that do the consultancy side of this and work with pretty big retailers, it's months and months.
Well, it's one thing switching it on, and it's another thing with the change management piece and getting people trained in hearts and minds. So Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Rob. I've as we've looked through this podcast and looking at you, it looks like you've got kind of the hand of God coming out to the left of you. I've got the sun. This mic arm is coming out of the sun. So you must have been saying some good stuff today. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. We have been BlackCurve. This is our podcast, E-commerce Matters. We help e-commerce businesses make pricing decisions. This podcast is available on all major podcasting platforms. We look forward to welcoming you next time. See you soon. Bye-bye.